Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second podcast of the Ark Podcast. We have a phenomenal lineup of not only guests but topic this week. I'm really worried we're not going to get through everything. What you can expect with this particular podcast is we've got Matt Kean resigning from politics, breaking news yesterday. Is his war against plastic straws over? Chris Bowen and his plan for floating experimental wind turbines off the coast of New South Wales and WA. Peter Dutton finds his spine and pitches a plan for 7 nuclear power stations around the country. Chinese Premier visits Canberra and bullies Australian journalist. Albo moving forward with a federal truth-telling and treaty process despite the referendum result. Albo and other politicians getting a massive pay rise. Do they really deserve it in a cost of living crisis? Robert Irwin threatens to sue Pauline Hanson over his appearance in her cartoons. Nigel Farage sweeps past the Conservative Party and starts reshaping the right in the UK. The UN warns that AI could spread holocaust denial. Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk warn of Donald Trump going to prison. CNN planning on muting debaters' mics in their first debate in a week from now with Biden and Trump. And non-US citizens are being handed voter registration forms throughout the USA, the ones that are arriving. And the Secret Service plan for potential Trump prison sentencing on July 11th. And the last one is the Exodus death inquiry hearing that Senator Babbitt has done and the devastating stories there. So we've got a phenomenal guest lineup today. We've got a few familiar faces, a few new faces from last week. On my right, I've got Tony Nicklick from AFL Solicitors. Tony's a phenomenal guy that's had my back and many people's backs with jab injuries over the last few years. I've also got Natalie Duma from last week. Natalie, a dentist, but also someone that was hugely beneficial to Senator Babbitt getting elected in the UAP, but also John Ruddick getting elected in New South Wales for the Libertarian Party. And on my left, I've got Chris de Bruin. Chris, what are you wearing?
I'm rugged up for the CEO sleep out. I was in the car on the way to it. It's a cold one out there. So, mate.
Good on you.
What I came in.
Good on you, man. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Chris, if you guys didn't know, Chris is someone that has basically been covering a ton of protests over the last few years. Phenomenal independent journalist. He's covered the Bishop Murray and other Wakely situations that happened over the last few months. But this is our panel for the week. We've got a massive lineup. Please share this podcast. Give it a like. And before I go any further, I wanted to say a huge shout out. I've never done this before, but we've actually brought on our very first sponsor to the podcast, which is a gold company. Totally aligned. I've wanted a gold sponsor since 2020 when I first started making videos. I'm pleased to be partnering with As Good As Gold Australia. They share our values. They're on the same page with us. I wouldn't have it any other way. And as a parting gift with all the guests that I have here today, I'm sending them away with one of these very special coins, which is from As Good As Gold Australia, which reads... They minted their own freedom coin. It's like, this is just who they are. I wish I had that. They have this in gold and silver. What they have minted around it is freedom is only acquired through the constant pursuit and unrelenting struggle to reach it. I mean, the Daryl and the lovely people at As Good As Gold Australia, they deliver gold anywhere around the country. This is a tumultuous time with inflation and everything. Let them know that we've actually sent you. When you go sign up to actually buy gold off their website, let them know that you heard of us from Joel Jammal, the Ark Podcast, and that they'll totally support with what we're doing. I really like them and I want to send them a lot of love. But moving forward, first topic of the day, Matt Kean has resigned from politics. I'm very keen to hear your thoughts on this, guys. But before we do get there, this is the video that he basically ended up putting out there.
I want to say goodbye and good luck. I'm going to continue to find opportunities to serve my community and to serve the causes that I care deeply about, particularly in the environment space and particularly when it comes to tackling climate change. I'm very proud of what I've been able to achieve. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I've been afforded. I want to say thank you to everyone on this journey, including the press gallery, including everyone in political life and the broader public for your generosity and your patience. Yeah, no, I won't be standing for the federal parliament. I'm looking to pursue a career in the corporate sector, in the private sector, in the energy and climate related spaces.
And to you, Matt Kean, I say plastic straws are back. Guys, I have a gift for you. I've got more of these. Please hand one to Tony. Basically, this is the guy that phased out plastic straws, single-use plastics, and has been spearheading the climate agenda. He was considering running against the Teals at a federal level. You don't have to use it, Tony. It's okay.
No, it's okay.
But he ended up basically pulling out. He put a statement out yesterday saying, "Look, I'm not going to run," and he's basically going to pursue a career in the renewable energy industry. I thought that you
God
might find
help
that
us.
Yeah, I know. What did you guys think about all this when you first saw it?
Good riddance, but how unfortunate. Is he going to end up being some lobbyist in the energy sector and lobbying the parliament for more green and inverted commas energy, like solar panels and, more windmills that kill koalas and whales and all sorts of things? I don't know. But when he did get rid of these, this is like an antique.
Amazing.
When he did get rid of the plastic straws, funnily enough, the paper straws came out in a plastic wrapper. So he did so much good, didn't he? And the paper had some forever chemicals that apparently cause cancer. So thank you, Maddie.
Yeah.
Oh, we're seeing this a lot, aren't we? Especially, we're seeing a lot of people transitioning from the political sphere into the private. I think it's hard for us to doubt that a lobbying position, one where skills and knowledge acquired by virtue of serving the public is now going into that private sector. And the most important part about that is those skills and knowledge that they've acquired through that comes at the hands of the taxpayer. Now he's going by free into a corporate environment upon which they'll make scores and scores of dollars knowing what he knows. And that there is something we're seeing increasingly across a broad spectrum of the political sphere.
Yeah, and we see that with the defence industry, don't we? The revolving door. Not like, didn't ScoMo, Chris, organised the AUKUS agreement while he was a member of Parliament, and then he goes and works for one of the companies that was contracted to do the AUKUS agreement.
Julie Bishop, Christopher Pine. This is not just the first.
John Skerritt.
There is more money to be made in regulating and speculating than generating. And this is not just energy. This is across all sorts of different industries. Where, take Origin, for example. They don't make money off generating energy anymore. They make money off speculating what's going to happen in the market ahead, in the days ahead. And we're going to see this is just the thin end of that.
Yeah, it's really disgusting because, you see people struggling with the, obviously the cost of living, cost of COVID, cost of lockdowns. That's what it is. Sorry, it annoys me. But you see them go to Coles and Woolies and everything's wrapped in plastic, like, all the chicken, all the everything. And it's like, what's that about, guys?
Plastic bottles.
So I was recently in Zimbabwe, hence all the animals behind me, guys. And these straws, they're still using straws, over there. And it's like, I had to bring these back just to I'm obviously not selling them to you. I kind of want to be sued for having these plastic straws because I reckon a ton of the punters would get behind me on it. I think people are so sick of this, this straw situation. They're just like, single plastic.
But it's also plastic bags, which have been replaced by paper bags. So how many trees are we killing? But that's okay because environmentalists don't care about the trees or the wildlife. We only care about the plastic. My question is, do you think he's going to go and work for Simon
Holmes a Court?
Yeah.
Potentially. Look, he was thinking about staying in politics, but I think once he lined up a job in the renewable sector, he decided to leave.
Yep.
But I can't help but mention Donald Trump. I think in 2020 he came out with his own plastic straws with Trump on the side of them, and he raised like $2 million.
I love it.
I would do that, except for the fact that it's illegal, thanks to Matt Kean. That's why I'm so excited about this, guys. So forgive my my sass on this. But talking about the renewable situation, the next story we have is actually with you're gonna love this. I wish Craig was here. He mentioned to me, Joel, this week you have to cover the renewable plan that Chris Bowen's laid out. He's planning to have over 300 floating wind turbines anchored off Port Kebla. These wind turbines are so experimental, they've been placed right in the middle of a whale migration channel. And you couldn't make this crap up. Here's an image of what the actual design looks like with the blades and then the platform floating and how it's anchored with mooring lines and power cables. People, I don't know where the environmentalists are, and this shows you how full of crap they are. People are actually genuinely worried about, whales getting tangled up in this stuff. I mean, the Japanese don't have anything on this, but it looks like Chris Bowen's going for a massive kill count here. And this whale migration channel I didn't know about this. This is not a joke. Goes right up the coast, both with humpback whales, but also the southern right whales for their migrating and breeding grounds. And the other thing is on the west coast, where they've proposed the other set of wind turbines, they've actually they didn't realise that, I don't know how they didn't pick up on this. Andrew Hastie rightly pointed out that they're positioning this right near the submarine base for AUKUS. So so these submarines, I have to double check this, but if we're having that near submarines, nuclear submarines, imagine them getting tangled with these.
You've got to ask yourself a question, don't you? Is there any planning going into this, and to what extent is that planning affecting the wildlife substantially at a greater, higher level? And they're saying, it's about renewables and whatnot, and trying to save the climate, but what about everything else? Everything's a part of that eco structure, and it's not a substantive response to where we're going. I just think it's ridiculous, to be quite candid with you. The next one's going to be, these wind turbines floating around on Wi-Fi hubs, and that's how they're going to transfer. That's how they're going to transfer the energy. It's ridiculous. It really is. I think they're playing politics, which is trying to appease the public. There is no substantive response to this, and that's the way I'm taking this.
Well, where's the environmental study with all this, and who designed it? Was it Bowen that designed it himself? I mean, this is ridiculous. You've got all the way around, you've got all these wind turbines out killing birds. So we've got the eagles who are dying. We're losing a whole lot of wildlife. They're cutting down all these forests for these windmills, and then the koalas haven't got a habitat because you need quite a few windmills to generate energy. And then again, when the wind doesn't blow, you don't have energy. I don't even understand why you would want to destroy the environment and all the beautiful creatures in it.
Yeah, I think it's shocking, and the idea that the animal rights groups haven't really talked about this. What do you think about this, Chris?
Subsidies. I think putting the politics, which both sides really going into, are there subsidies behind this? And inevitably with these projects, they seem to be uneconomic in and of themselves. Can they support themselves economically? Can they provide the kind of demand, the supply that the network wants? If these are profitable without subsidies, and they don't seem to affect the migration zones, because I'm sure there's a billion environmental impact studies, but inevitably those environmental impact studies tend to be politically slanted by the people within them. And that's one of the concerns. Especially you're showing me they're tethered.
Yeah.
From what I've looked into at the North Sea power, North Sea wind, of what I've looked into there, that's sensitive.
So do you think Matt Kean's going to be subsidising these?
I have no doubt. I have no doubt this would be uneconomic.
Being facetious, but
they're using old straws to tether them. I'm hearing.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Honestly, it's like they made this plan on the back of a napkin or something. Jonah has warned Chris Bowen. He's basically said, "Don't pick a fight with the whales. I learnt that the hard way." So he sends this photo in. This is obviously from AI, but I couldn't help myself, guys. But going off this, this is a crazy plan. I was listening to Andrew Clarnell on Sky News, and he made a really, really good point. If this is their solution, this actually makes what Peter Dutton has announced just recently quite palatable. And he's made the point that he's just revealed today, actually, breaking news, that there's 7 nuclear power sites he's now identified. He's made the point. He actually released this particular video announcing where they are going to actually be and what they might involve. And Peter Dutton's found his groove, announcing these 7 nuclear power stations.
He's opposing, Joel. He's opposing. He's doing what he should have done right from the get-go. Be in opposition and oppose.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe we'll get into this later with the UK, but maybe what's going on here is he's actually found his spine as a result, and he's like, crap, I have to do this, otherwise, we're going to face a one nation or something wipeout. And this is particularly what he said.
If you had to guess what this is, what would you think? A futuristic arena or a new stadium? Well, this is actually a concept for a nuclear power plant that will offer clean and affordable energy, but not here in Australia under Labor's plans. Out of the world's 20 largest economies, Australia is the only one not using nuclear energy or moving towards it. The future is here, and for far too long Australia has been stuck in the past on nuclear energy. This topic will affect generations to come.
You get the point. So the point is, where these are actually going, around the country. Here's a map of it. We've got Callide and Tarong in Queensland. We've got Liddell Power Station, Mount Piper in New South Wales. A lot of these are former power stations, by the way, guys. Loy Yang in Victoria, Port Augusta, which is just a small modular reactor, and in South Australia. And then in Perth, we've got Collie, which is another one. And as you saw in that particular video, yeah, it looks very modern. A lot of people, they think with nuclear power stations that it's some kind of Homer Simpson thing. It's just steam. It's actually just steam.
With the big funnels coming out everywhere, it's not necessarily like that.
And speaking to just the detail on all this, Labor, when they released this new plan, they made the point that they attacked Labor. Peter Dutton, he said, Labor's approach requires 58 million solar panels and 3,500 new industrial wind turbines and up to 28,000 kilometres of new transmission lines across the country. Energy experts have warned that Labor's rollout could be between $1.2 and $1.5 trillion. That's more than our debt right now.
And then what happens in 15 years when you've got to replace all those solar panels and they become landfill? Where does that go?
Yeah.
Where's it coming from?
China?
That too. Where is it coming from?
And who are we supporting to get that stuff when we can have homegrown, manufactured in Australia, Australian jobs,
That's right.
Australian hardware? And this is what we've missed over the last, I think, since the Howard era, where a lot of manufacturing was sent offshore, and we're actually paying the price for that now.
We've got slave labour that we're supporting. We've got the Uyghurs manufacturing solar panels. We've got children's slave labour and cobalt mining in the Congo. I mean, why are we doing that when we've got uranium stores in Australia and thorium?
It's a stark contrast when you look at the level of hypocrisy of let's save the environment, let's do this to save the children and this, but there's all these different elements that people have singularly put into one little basket, but they fail to realise nuclear is certainly one of the most viable options. Secondly, every time you go to a hospital, Natalie, you can attest to this, nuclear medicine.
Yeah.
Nuclear
Well,
medicine,
we've got
people are
Lucas
injecting it.
Yeah, exactly. Radiotherapy, all sorts of things.
100%. And, Malcolm Turnbull, he didn't mince words on this particular topic. He said the coalition's nuclear power plan offers the worst of all energy worlds, higher emissions and higher electricity costs. Now, Chris, you responded to that.
I couldn't help it.
How's Snowy 2.0 going?
I couldn't help it. I couldn't help but clapping back at Turnbull and his dream, as well-intentioned as it may have been for Snowy 2.0, which has gone off the rails from 1.5, 2 billion. We're now approaching 12 billion. I put the estimates there now. The tunnel boring machines are stuck. We're 5-7 years over. We are well overdue and beyond that. The same may happen with nuclear. It might happen. But the roadmap and reward for nuclear is so much more than what's Snowy 2.0, which does not generate energy. Maybe it's great costed, great, fantastic, brilliant, all the estimates there. But we've gone from 2 to 12. So I don't know how that original business case is in any way costing in a 6-fold increase in costs and still adding up. So I had to say something back.
Well, the rubber hits the road, doesn't it, when you come and look at what does each generate and for what cost and for how long. That's where the rubber hits the road. And look, don't get me wrong, I think, renewable energy, there's a future for it, photovoltaics and that, but it is certainly not there, and nuclear right now surpasses it. It absolutely surpasses it.
Yeah.
Energy efficiency. I mean, it is the most energy efficient energy.
Yeah.
Why would you not look at it? Certainly, it's one of. When you've got solar panels, sun doesn't shine, you don't have energy. If you have too much sunshine, where does it go? Because our grid can't even handle, if you have way too many sunny days, it can't handle the backlash of the energy. Is that correct, or am I making that up? I mean, our electricity.
Storage.
Yeah.
How do you store it?
Exactly.
Where do you store it?
Oh, well, they're actually, isn't it funny? I did see a story the other day where those people who do have solar panels apparently are being charged extra for energy storage. So all those savings that they thought they were going to have, they're being charged for. So there's a guy, I can't remember where, he was giving his electricity away. He was going to his neighbours saying, would you like free electricity? Let me charge your electric vehicle.
The regulator is introducing new regulations that you will be billed for feed-in solar as of next year. So if you're feeding in, they'll bill you. So you either need to isolate yourself and cut it off, or get yourself a battery, which is yet another investment, 10, 20, 50.
$9,000 or something, yeah.
And maybe that's great, maybe that's fantastic, but we've kept moving the goalposts on this energy journey. Oh, we're going to shut down coal. Okay, yeah, maybe we shut down brown coal because it's not there, fine. We get solar panels. Okay, we've got solar panels, but now you need to go beyond solar panels. And this is where the voter, I think, looks at that and goes, you really, this is on wheels now. Now we need batteries. What's next? What comes after batteries? Community batteries. Where is this going?
Yeah.
And that's where the doubts come in, and we turn to baseload.
We've spent a considerable amount of time talking about nuclear and climate agenda. This is shaping up to becoming the topic for the election, basically. And it's really interesting because we haven't really had this for some time. And it's going to be crazy as we get closer and closer to an election, which is starting to look more like next year. It sounds like Albo is going to run the clock down to May next year. Peter Dutton, I like you. I like the fact that you put the flag in the stone now. You've actually in the ground. You've drawn the line. You've said, I'm running on this. I'm pro-nuclear. All of Europe's pro-nuclear. Even Macron and the Greens Party in Europe, they're all for nuclear. The idea that this is my stand I'm taking right now. So kudos to you. The problem he has is obviously there's the wets within his party. There's the people in the minor parties as well that are trying to cut him down, whether it's the Teals or the Greens. I trust him to get this done, but with a Pauline Hanson controlled Senate. I trust this to be done. And so I genuinely like Peter. I want him to do well, but I don't trust his party, the people in there. But they'll be forced to do this if Pauline Hanson and her senators, like Senator
Roberts,
Senator Malcolm Roberts, gets elected again later this year or next year. And so, yeah.
As long as he doesn't backtrack, because as we saw last week, he went from Paris Accord, well, I want to pull out of Paris Accord and to back to 2030.
Yeah.
So he's got to stop backtracking and trying to appease too many people. He's just got to decide and follow, and that's it. Be a decisive leader. That's the first time I've seen that, and I think, great, congratulations.
Well, kudos to him, I would have thought, because what Australia has missed over the last, say, 4 or 5 years is an opposition. And I don't care which side you're talking. We've had the minor independents, I guess, and they're really starting to track in a positive direction, such as One Nation. I think Malcolm's doing some great work, and you've got some people within the Libs, Senator Rennick and Antic and these guys, they're doing some great work. You've got Babbitt doing some great work as well. But it's that opposition, that key opposition, and we've seen that in the yes and no vote, didn't we? And we've seen two decisive camps, and Australia has been longing for that because we haven't had that. Yeah. And I think having a box with two of the same people in the same box hasn't done us any service, and that's why we get all these crises, cost of living crisis, because there is no opposition providing a credible alternative. And here we're starting to see credible alternatives.
Absolutely. Chris?
Can I point out with that social media, a difference is often Dutton is just putting up content where he's addressing a press conference. Boring. He's talking direct to the camera here. Yeah. He's speaking to the voter, to the listener about a specific topic. He's really trying to reach through that wall and say, hey, I'm trying to reach you. I want to talk to you. And that's pretty unusual with most of them because it's always this boring, I'm talking to the people who matter, the press.
Yeah,
and you can watch from the sideline if you'd like to. No, he's saying, I need you. I need you on board with this because your energy bills are going from $200, $300 a month. This is now a significant $5,000 a year. These aren't trivial numbers anymore. These are people who on less than $100,000 a year, which is used to actually a lot of money. On less than that, this is hurting them. People in this winter are turning off not just their air cons, their hot waters, their electric blankets. They're going to bed with hot water bottles and being thankful for what they can. This is really hurting people.
Especially the elderly.
Yes.
Like when you're looking at the pensioners and he's providing a lifeline. Granted, it's going to take quite a few years to get there. But you're right. What an observant thing you just said. He was looking at the camera. And it does make a big difference when he's talking to the voter because, like Tony said, we have had no opposition for a very long time, no conservative opposition.
Absolutely. And if I could just add to both of what you've just said, there is the media component. The media has dropped off in the last 3 to 5 years, but now we're starting to see them do what they're supposed to do, okay? Because unless you're questioning power, which is your political base, Everything else is public relations, and that's all we've had for the last 5 years. They've been cheerleaders, and I admire it when I see a journalist with courage. I really do. I admire it, and that's where the independent social media people have really taken traction, because that has been the only courage and source of journalistic courage we've seen. We had the old John Pilgers, the late John Pilger, people like him. These are the people that actually rose up, and yes, that you could see straight away, you could discern the barley from the wheat right there and then. These are the people who are doing their job. It's their ethical job to challenge power, and I think you've both touched on some great points there.
Yeah, absolutely. The secret to success, and my free advice to Peter Dutton and anyone running in right-wing politics in the West, is authenticity.
Yep.
And you know what's funny? No one has quite worked out why that's the recipe. It's because of technology. Big tech and the ability to actually access other people's thoughts around the world, it's completely cut the curtain, per se, on the way our politics works. And now the only way through it in politics is authenticity and media. And so that's why Nigel Farage and Donald Trump are getting cut through. They're their authentic, unapologetic self. So the more Peter Dutton does this, and, you know, he's welcome to, okay, we'd never do this because he's surrounded by the same advisors that ScoMo had, I'd presume. But if he were to come here and do long-form discussions with grassroots sort of people like myself and others, and be yourself. That's what people want. You know, I see Peter Dutton. I see an opportunity there. Will they be able to pull up the plane in time with the Liberal Party, or will they do what the Conservative Party in the UK has done, which we'll get into later? We'll see.
I think they can do it, Joel.
Me too, yeah.
I think they can do it, and the way they do it is, like what you're saying, is have that authenticity, tap into your political base, show them there's a real alternative, not just a perceptual alternative, but show them there's a real alternative here for you to take. And if you do take it, then not only is your cost of living going to decrease, but everything around that starts to transition into better wages, your employment sector is increasing, and people now have jobs. We're becoming a welfare state where people are suckling on the teat of government, and this is where they hold people to account. You see it all the time. Oh, well, we'll just take their funding away. Well, if you take their funding away, this is what people want. You know, he who pays the piper calls the tune.
That's right.
Absolutely. The only problem I see Dutton having is the left factions and how strong they are, how much pushback he's going to have. If he can withstand those, he's got a chance. He's got a chance to get the Liberal Party across the line in the next election.
Absolutely. Look, moving on, we've got a situation where we had the Chinese Premier visit Australia. Now, look, I don't like Albo. I really don't. But no matter who our Prime Minister is, I expect him to stand up for Australians, whether it's Julian Assange or anyone, because, heck, any one of us could be overseas at any point, and we could be in adverse situations where we're out of our control. Wouldn't you want your head of state to fight for you? Well, Prime Minister Albo, he's rolled out the red carpet to the Chinese Premier. And basically we saw the situation where, and we're going to see in a sec, Cheng Lei, who was a political prisoner in America, in China rather, she ended up coming back and she's now working for Sky News. She was just totally being intimidated by these Chinese at this press conference, and they didn't want the cameras. These staffers that had come with the Premier, the Chinese Premier, were intimidating her and making sure the cameras didn't view her and then look at the Premier. They thought she might do something. I was like, what is this? What country are we living in? And Pauline Hanson, you know, she didn't mince her words at all. She went hard.
I think it's disgusting what they did to Cheng Lei in that press conference that was held there. And I'm more disgusted with our Prime Minister. He just, I cringe when I see him. He's no leader. He absolutely disgusts me with his answers to these questions. As you said last night, he's got all these advisors. He should have known, and he would have known what happened during that conference. He hasn't got the backbone. As Peter Dutton said, he hasn't got a backbone. He hasn't stood up to them. He's had more than 24 hours to make a comment to the President himself, and I'd like to hear it personally from him, what was said to the President. Not officials have taken it up with the President that's out here from China. You know, China is no friends of ours. We trade with them. But we actually we trade with Coles and Woolworths. They're not our friends. China will never be our friends. And I'm sick of this Labor Party, this Labor government kowtowing to the Chinese every time he opens his mouth. You know, these aren't friends of ours, of how they dealt with our divers, with the helicopter, with the closing of the sea, that you can't go in their waters. We have just kowtowed to them so much, and it sickens me to see this Prime Minister. He is so weak, lily-livered Prime Minister that doesn't answer the people.
I love her. I love Pauline.
Sorry, this is the Pauline Hanson Appreciation Club. This is how I view Albo and Xi Jinping. This is the Pauline Hanson Appreciation Club. I think she speaks to the Aussie people. But Chris, what did you think about this whole situation?
As someone who's been in those situations a few times, it wasn't the Chinese representatives getting in the way that got my attention. We know this. Why is anyone even surprised? This kind of roughhousing that happens. It was our Australian staffers getting in the way of Cheng Li. It was a Chinese official's going to do that. You expect the PMC or the PMO to then go and run, or DFAT, whoever the staff is, whatever department they were, to run defense for your team. Cheng Li, who's on the Australian side, right? You've got Chinese staffers. That's the two sides, and that's fine. No, it was the Australian staffers getting in the way of Cheng that really got my attention. That they didn't go see a kerfuffle happening over there and go, oh, it looks like this comes kind of scuffle. Let's see if we can separate it, talk it through. No. They aligned right alongside with the Chinese staffers and went, we're going to block your cameras. And I was like, oh, wow, this is where we're at. Is that actually what happened? Because I remember looking at it, and I know they went up to them and said, can you please move? And they were like, no. Have I got that totally wrong? They stood right in front of Cheng. Cheng Li was trying to stand up and look and holding up a camera and had their staff had it as well. It was the PMC staff, or PMD, it was Albanese staffers getting in the way of Cheng Li and not breaking up. Did you see them going,
I thought it was the Premier staffers, right? I'll have to double check that.
The Premier staffers were getting in the way of Cheng Li. You expect that. We expect that from the Chinese government. Anyone who's surprised by this, so the Chinese act like this, get real. It's been decades of this. That's just how they act. They're direct, they're upfront, they shirt front you. Fine. We know this is going to happen. What happens then? And we didn't see them trying to separate them, trying to mollify. Instead, it was on the Chinese side.
So, Chris, do you think that was our government, and as Pauline put it, our gutless, backboneless Prime Minister, who was completely aware of what was going on?
If there was something that happened before camera that Cheng was acting poorly, then whatever, I would say that Vicky Zhu, who was another incident that happened, has a more coloured history. But all of the footage I saw of Cheng Li, and I looked through the live streams, I didn't see Cheng Li, acting out, being a bit of a Drew Pavlou, attention seeker, not that, Drew, love his work, but people seek attention. That's just how it is. And you expect the reaction to that. Cheng Li was very polite, very calm, and just found it just sitting there.
And yet she's got all the, she's been in jail in China for 3 years. So she's got every right to be pretty angry. Yeah. And this wouldn't have helped her to make peace with the Chinese government? We should be looking at our own government. We cannot control the Chinese government. Advocate for their interests that they see fit. That's what they do, and why is our government not picking our side and saying this is our Australian citizen, this is our event. You would not harass reporters, even if they're French reporters, whatever. You would not harass reporters while you're here. You are visiting or not. They don't, and we need to get used to an elected Albanese government staffers that do not get reprimanded when that happens, and just let that happen. And that's very disappointing. Let that sink in.
All right, I'll have to double check the whole thing about the staffers, because my recollection of it was these were the Premier staffers that were blocking the cameras, and there were attempts made by the Albo's staffers to go and say, hey, can you please move and whatever, and the Premier staffers basically no, we don't speak English or something like and I was just like, That's interesting that they're doing that. But then for the Prime Minister to not say something, that's what's unforgivable to me. It's like, whoa, bro, I get it. You're trying to normalize relations with the Chinese right now, but there's no respect. There's no respect. And if you don't respect yourself, why should they respect you? How you treat those in your family, you make it okay for others to treat them that way. That's the general rule.
But even on a more geopolitical sense, you're seeing, the Chinese, and for whatever reason it may be, they've become more brazen in the way they interact with the international community in general, and hence when they come to Australia, for instance, they're coming here and they're saying, well, look, yeah, this is your house, but we're going to tell you how it's going to run. No, I'm sorry, this is our house, and this is where the Australian Prime Minister and Parliament and all, they should stand up for that. And not only stand up for that, you made a really good point earlier. When we have people abroad, look at Julian Assange, a whistleblower who, in my view, should be a national hero and raised to on a pedestal for what he has done, not only for journalism, but for transparency, which is what a journalist should be doing. Hence, that is where these prime ministers and our international relations, they need to step up, and they really do need to step up. If this was another country, they'd be stepping up for their citizens. Tell me, can you remind me of, there was this one international event where Donald Trump, and you had all the leaders, and then someone walked in front of him and he's just gone whooshka. You know, he's given them the big old state of origin palm.
But that's Trump. Like, you cannot compare Trump and Albanese. I mean, that's like comparing chalk and cheese.
Absolutely.
It's day and night and everything else. To your point, this is our house. You're 100% right. It is our home. It is our house. But we are selling this house to the Chinese anyway. How many assets have we sold to the Chinese? How much land? How many properties? I mean, where does this end? And we do have to stand up, because this is we're all patriots here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. And I don't think Albanese is such a big patriot.
Yeah, and ScoMo, for all his failings, at least he actually called them out on an international scale and said, I want an inquiry into the origins of COVID. I want it now, basically. And, obviously that didn't succeed. I reckon he lacked the backing from many countries, but he was the tip of the spear on that. Again, no big fan of ScoMo. He really let us down in a number of different ways. He was supposed to be a conservative prime minister, and he just allowed the states to run roughshod over us with lockdowns. But at the same time, at least he stood up to China and actually did what Aussies are meant to do, and be larrikins and say stuff you to the world, and I'm going to take you all on single-handedly. Like, I actually really liked him for that particular aspect.
And that's exactly what the Chinese hate.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, there's a hierarchy from their point of view.
Yeah.
They are 1.4 billion people, arguably about to be the world's largest economy. We are what, as they said in their demands, gum on the shoe, who was Hu Jin of the Global Times described as a gum on China's shoe. There is a hierarchy, and and their job, as they see it, is to get us to fit into that place of the global hierarchy, which is beneath them, be it happening here or at other times. And we're refusing that. That larrikin attitude that we have is everything the Chinese hate.
Yeah.
And they don't see it the same way that, are we not equals? No, they don't see us as equals, because economically, on every different angle, we're not. After all, we have a rotisserie of flags depending on who's there. Where was the Aboriginal flag? Where was the First Nations flag? Oh, we've changed the flags that Albanese always insists on being there. Now that the Chinese are here, we just have one flag? You think they don't see that? We have a rotisserie depending on, we will change the flag. We will literally change our flags depending on who we're talking to.
I'm crazy. Do you guys remember that story in 2020 when ScoMo was basically like, we want an inquiry into the origins of COVID and how it started, and then China's like, that's it. We're going to do all these sanctions. One of the sanctions was the coal. They were going to stop accepting your coal into certain ports. And then they proceeded to have rolling blackouts across China. Do you remember that story?
Yes.
I covered it in the original Ark show. And I don't think we recognize our power here. I reckon that we are lacking. We've got some real idiots running our country right now, and that the fundamental.
That's a very kind term, Joel.
Monkeys.
I mean, I was going to say, to your point, that Albanese, since we're the gum on the shoe, he's licking that shoe.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem.
The Australian dollar has now become the Pacific peso, from and that's this is, really, and economy is power, but now, the Australian dollar has become the Pacific peso for a reason. It's because we gave everything, we pushed it all offshore.
We don't produce anything.
Where is it all gone? And we've become our own worst enemy, and that's why, they're the gum on the shoe. We've made ourselves that gum. We've chewed our own gum, spat it on the ground, and we're stepping on it and expecting people. Now people are just riding roughshod over Australia.
They are willing to send their cities into darkness just over harsh words, harsh language. That is determination. Do not underestimate what they're willing to do for face.
But how long is that going to take until the people rise up? Because if you do that to multiple cities, there is 1.4 billion people or whatever it is in China who are not going to take blackouts. So this is the thing, like, yes, absolutely, they will do whatever it takes, but then the people will rise up. I don't know if you remember during lockdowns when they locked up all those cities and people started screaming to each other, and then there was protests. And what happened? The lockdowns just disappeared.
Honestly, one of the predictions I made in 2020, mid-2020, was that don't be surprised if by the time this is over, the whole Chinese country's just collapsed. The CCP's completely collapsed. I don't think we fully understand how vulnerable they were. You know, it's like the USSR just sort of collapsed overnight. But moving on, I wanted to touch this topic with particularly talking about Albo. What's going on here? Why isn't it changing to the next one? It has frozen.
Okay, if I can continue on that point while you try and get that one.
I actually got it. Sorry. Anthony Albanese, despite the voice vote, despite what happened with regards to 60 to 70% of the country opposing the voice, he is now still open to a Makarrata Commission for Truth and Treaty Telling for Indigenous Australians. I'm going to come to Natalie in a second, but Anthony Albanese says he will attend Arnhem Land's Gama Festival in August to talk about a way forward on Indigenous policy after the defeat of the Voice referendum, keeping open the prospect of setting up a Makarrata Commission to advance truth and a treaty process. The treaty process is undergoing various states at the moment, as Anthony Albanese mentioned. A lot of the leaders were disappointed in the referendum result, and they're eager to talk at Gama with Albo in August about a potential way forward despite that. This is a country that still needs to reconcile with itself, Mr. Thomas Mayo said. Strong advocates of the referendum have privately questioned why the government hasn't made faster progress on a post-voice agenda, despite the defeat. Why haven't you just run over democracy? Natalie, can you tell me?
Sorry, 60 to 70% of the population voted no. Anyway,
Makarrata.
Yes, I was very, very curious because, you know, sometimes you think, well, the word itself, what does it mean? So I looked it up and I found the definition in, I think it was Flinders University. Yeah, Flinders University. So it's a word in the Yolngu language. I hope I said that correctly. And it means the resumption of normal relations after a period of hostilities. So we must have had a lot of hostilities. I'm a bit confused. Like, I wasn't aware that there were hostilities in our country. And the Yolngu people I looked up as well, and they were in the northeastern Arnhem Land. It's a very small area of Australia. So I'm sure that Makarrata would be different in different tribes. I'm sure there's different words for it. I just don't understand.
Yeah. Sorry, we all good, Rami?
Take a break.
No, that's all right.
We're all good. We just need to fix up the HDMI, please.
Yeah, sure, mate. No worries. You guys are getting an absolute authentic experience with regards to the podcast. But sorry, Makarrata specifically talking to the, you know, it being the end of a hostility period. I've had this explained to me before. Correct me if I'm wrong. I sat with Alec Dumaji, and he made the point that we need a treaty to end the period of war that we're currently in. So that's what Makarrata is basically saying. We're coming out of that war period. Right.
I wasn't quite aware that we were at war.
Right. That's so weird.
War?
Well, hostilities.
Wow.
We've had hostility. So that's what Makarrata is. I wasn't aware of the exact terminology or what language it came from, but I thought I'd look it up because it is confusing. The difference between the treaty, you know, the Makarrata, and what was the other thing that all the teals were going on about?
Truth and reconciliation process or something?
Yeah.
Truth telling.
There's something from the heart.
Oh, the Uluru Statement from the heart.
That's the one.
Yeah,
yes.
that one.
Yes,
Yeah.
I had lots of interesting conversations with Allegra Spender on that one. So, yeah.
Right. So my understanding is they want to do this treaty process so that they can cut things off, basically. But the way they were going about it is they wanted one voice that could negotiate for all the tribes around Australia, which this is why the Black Sovereignty movement was so against it. And that one voice would be able to, in a position and democratically vote on behalf of all these Aboriginal groups. And so all these Aboriginal groups, which is impossible because they'd be ceding their sovereignty if the voice got up. That's why they opposed it. And they could then move forward in a truth-telling process, a treaty process to end the hostility period, to enshrine even more power into the Constitution for Aboriginal Australians. I warned about this when I went to New Zealand. I did an interview about their Waitangi Tribunal. It's like The Voice, but it's been around for like 30 years. This is the sort of thing I was really worried about. Tony, what did you think about all this?
Oh, look, for me, as you know, I was firmly in the no camp when it came to this. And for me, I find it almost a contradiction of sorts where, we hear, in a democratic society, but we're going to have one voice. It just contradicts its very own nature. Secondly, I do a lot of work, well, maybe not in the last year or two, but I did a lot of work in the communities. And one thing I know about the communities is they're very fluid and dynamic, and you don't speak for all those communities. Each community speaks for itself, and they have that tribal mentality, and that's how they operate. Here we are saying, let's have a treaty. It's going to be my treaty, right, the way I set it up. You're going to listen to me, but we're going to give you this voice that we can absolutely usurp at any point in time. That is something they're not going to accept, and I sincerely hope they never accept it, because it totally takes away from their own identity.
Yeah, and we're starting to see this even more. We've got the Kabi people. They've awarded the native title over 356,000 hectare area in Queensland, including a major Australian tourist hotspot. We're seeing this a lot of things being classified under native title. I'm really getting worried about this because despite the voice vote, despite a clear opposition to all this, we're seeing them run roughshod over it. Well, Chris, what
that map seems to include all of the Sunshine Coast.
It almost does. And I actually looked up what the Queensland South Native Title Services CEO, Tim Wilster, said. And he said they can't prohibit people from going places. They can't stop people from going onto beaches or onto Majimba Island or Mount Coolum. And native title isn't a grant of land. It's a recognition of land rights. What does that mean? Sorry, but I'm actually curious. What does that actually mean?
All they're saying is, again, what they're trying to say there is, they have these rights, but we still govern it. So in other words, it's more of a perceptual thing, because they can't stop you doing anything. If you look at all these land councils, and you've got land councils all over Australia, and you see mining tenements. And I remember looking into a case up there in Borroloola in Northern Territory. So these mining tenements, they basically do what they want in conjunction with those land councils, and in this sense it was the Northern Land Council, and they do deals on behalf of the communities. But when you actually go to the town of Borroloola, there's not a lot there. Right. There's not a lot there. So the money doesn't seem to be filtering from the mining tenement leases, licenses that go to the land councils to there. So in this sense, you have the town of Borroloola, and there's a river that goes all the way up into that peninsula, and you have dugongs and natural animals that they feed off, kangaroos, emus, and all that, all around there. Now, there's sulphur gases coming out of these mines. These animals are dying all over the place. Dugongs, the water, you see copper sulphate, you see cadmium, all these heavy metals in the waters, and people are getting these sicknesses that they've never had before. But that filtration of funding doesn't seem to be coming from the councils, or from the tenements anyway, to the leaseholds, to the tenements, and the councils into the communities, and that's the problem. They're not really getting what they're being told, and that's my biggest fear anyway. And when you've got animals and people dying of conditions they never died of previously, we've got to ask ourselves the question: where are we going with this? And that's exactly what this is about. We get to control more of that, and that's why we've got to say no.
We're going to where we've already been. Just to remind people, 30 years ago, we had this thing called ATSIC, the Australian Torres Strait Islanders Commission. Yeah. A democratically elected body that governed, at the time, $4 billion, but these days, I guess that'd be something close to $40 billion worth of funding, and how that should be spent. They formed their groups, but they ended up getting voter turnouts within their communities of less than 10%. And it descended into an entire journey of corruption and intertribal warfare, and then it eventually got shut down. In fact, by a Labor government made steps to shut it down. But we have been here before. We have tried to give a form of self-governance, self-responsibility, whatever you want to call it. We're going back to where we've been before, back to ATSIC.
Yeah, same. Look, it's the same house, different door. And that's what we're doing right now. And I think it's unfortunate because what we need to do is, if anything, we need to have a look at, the interaction between government and land councils and what is the purpose. Because a lot of people, and this came out through the No campaign, a lot of people are making a lot of money and getting funding from the communities, and it's not filtering through. Because if it was filtering through, why do we still have literally shanty towns?
Exactly. Do you remember Jacinta Price when she actually decided to put to the Parliament, let's do an audit of where this money is going to, and what happened? It failed.
Don't do that.
No, can't do that.
Can't do that at all. Look, I want to do another topic, another session on this dedicated session. I want to get Alec Dumagy out here. I'm going to try and fly him out here, and because he's not from here, he's from Queensland, rural Queensland, and I want to get Jacinta Price and maybe even Warren Mundine in. There are a ton of issues. Guys, I don't blame you if you find this confusing. I find it confusing myself. It's a mix of Aboriginal and English, and all of these different slippery ways they reword things, and Makarrata Commission, the treaty process, no, we're proceeding forward despite the voice vote. It's so convoluted. And there's a ton of people from the Black Sovereignty movement, like Alec Dumagy, they're not happy with what's been going on. Some of them want more control than native title, some want less, some want perpetual rent from the areas, some want a complete overhaul of the situation. And this, I don't blame you if you're getting lost on this. So I'm going to do a dedicated...
You've hit the nail on the head. Everybody is different. So you can't have this one body like The Voice or anything else governing a whole bunch of people because they've got opinions, they've got rules, they've got different tribes. It's crazy.
Absolutely. No, look, guys, if you want something like that, a dedicated topic on that where we can do a bit more research and actually go into this specifically on the topic, like what is native title? What does that mean? What does that mean? What implication does that have on my property? Do I truly own it? Do I not? Can they kick me off? I want to go through all of this with you guys. Please support the podcast, donate to the podcast, because I want to fly Alec Dumagy out here, put him up in a hotel and cover this with him and Jacinta Price and a few others. But moving on, let's talk about the people that are doing a really phenomenal job, like the pollies who are getting a massive pay increase. Anthony Albanese's salary is going to surpass $600K, as other pollies also get a pay increase. Peter Dutton will actually end up also getting a pay increase up to $432,000. And we're also going to see a situation where I think one of the top MPs, one of the top public servants, it's tipped over $1 million for them as well. What do you guys think? Well deserved?
That's a public servant. I still can't get over how much money public servants get. Was it the head of APRA, or I can't remember who was in Parliament, and they was it Gerard Rennick or Malcolm Roberts that asked them how much they're making, and he said something like 900 and something thousand. I thought, you're a public servant, like literally.
Yeah.
I understand that a head of a huge organisation deserves to get paid, but that's ludicrous when the Prime Minister's getting paid $600,000. Not that he deserves that much anyway, but he's not doing a great job.
And important to note, I forgot to mention, this is their third pay increase since Albo came into office. I mean, have you guys received like a 3% pay increase in the time that you've been in your job? Increase on increase? I mean, this is a really, really bad look. They should be doing something like what Donald Trump did, where he donated his paycheck every quarter, to something going on, even a pay freeze or something. I mean, things are really tough out there.
Well, how do we justify giving ourselves... I think it's obscene, to be quite honest with you. I actually think it's ridiculous. I think it's, I'm going to use a colloquial term here, it's un-Australian. Here we have families, and I know this because I get people calling me saying, look, people are wanting to foreclose, they're wanting to do, all sorts of things. I've got debt collectors knocking on my door. It's a real sad time, and I actually wrote to Anne Stanley, and I also wrote to the Minister for Finance talking about, what are we doing to relieve the pressure on the average Aussie What are we doing for that? You look at Mission Australia, record numbers of people, mums feeding children out of the back of their car, and then we get these pay rises. Look, I do get a bit emotional about that, because here we have kids. We've got single mums literally opening the back of their station wagon, and that's their pantry. That's their pantry, and they sort of move the pantry to the side, and they put the seats down so they can sleep there for the night. We've got homeless people now. They're sitting on riverbanks, and they're looking for some sort of cover over their head. It's a pretty cold winter. It's and what we're seeing here, when we see that, I just can't help but feel for the people out on the streets, and I think we can all do a little bit more to hold the politicians to account. And I can't see where they don't have the spine to look after their own communities. And I hold the councils responsible somewhat too. Look, they're not individually responsible, because they're not the ones doing this, because it's at a much higher level. But it's our policies. It's that wider policy of pushing manufacturing out, getting all that. It hasn't come down. It's not trickling down to the Aussie, but it happens to trickle down to them. How does it trickle down to them and not to the Aussie? And I think you made a good point. There's sacrifice, or if they all took a sacrifice, instead of 600, go down to 300, start distributing that. Watch policies start improving, because you should not be rewarded for something you're not achieving.
It's shocking, Chris. I'm going to come to you in a sec, but one of the points I heard from the mainstream media, I think it was on the project, they were saying, look, this is decided by a panel of experts that are professors, and they're across different boards.
Where have we heard that before?
Oh, yeah. Trust the experts, guys, of course.
Yeah.
These experts have basically said, look, we don't want to end up in a situation where if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. What do you think about that, Chris?
I think they're right.
Right.
I think politicians should be paid more.
Right.
Take that as a clip, but close the revolving door to the private sector.
Right.
Much more strict limits
That makes
on
sense.
asset ownership and disclosure.
That actually makes sense.
All of these limits that you bring in, pay them $1 million a year. You've got 150 seats in federal parliament, move it to 150. That's $150 million a year that you stop from leaking to the private sector. And all of a sudden, you've got all of these CEOs and bankers that otherwise would just go and Matt Kean their way out with all of their knowledge and make way more through backdoor deals and what have you. I think pay them more. Because Lee Kuan Yew, former Singaporean Prime Minister, agreed with this as well. You want to be able to retain that talent rather than it fleeing David Cameron style, Christopher Pine style, Julie Bishop style. That's far more of a cringe than $600,000. Double the salaries, but no more consultancy, PricewaterhouseCoopery shenanigans. No more of that. 10 years, 15 years, maybe, who knows how long. But we need, and arm up some form of body in order to look into some of these backdoor deals where corporations can't just be like, oh yeah, ScoMo or someone like that. Yeah, well, how about a cushy $2 million a year board position where you do nothing but we just use you? None of that. I think it's a net benefit.
I can feel the libertarian bone.
But then you've got somebody like Albanese who's really not deserving of the money that we're paying him. That's number one. So perhaps on top of that, sure, pay them, but then have a term of only 1 year and then audit them.
Sure.
Audit them fully. Yeah. What have they done? How much have they achieved? And I tell you what, if they've not achieved a lot, give them money back.
I'd hate to sit on the board where Matt Kean's going, because I'll tell you what, this straw is...
Be careful of a man wielding a red straw.
That straw, man, I got this.
Yeah.
But I think the revolving door, I think Dr. Marianne Damasi, she's a great journalist. She writes about health and a lot of things, but she also wrote about the revolving door. And when she interviewed me on that, I said a minimum term of 5 years post, because technology moves so fast. I'm saying minimum, because I think you were right, 10 to 15, that person's not worth it. And this straw, it'd be gone. Matt Kean, sorry, mate, you've lost your job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is that revolving door is, and I'm not making any accusations here because, I'm tapping into my criminology days. They're enablers of corruption.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm saying it's enabler. I'm not saying anyone is,
Yeah.
and I just want that to be very clear.
Yeah, of course.
But they're enablers for corruption. And this is the gateway to where corrupt deals are done. Okay? And that is it. Here you get access to an Australian intelligence service. You get You get commercial knowledge that no one else has, because one of ASIO's primary functions, I know people talk about terrorism, one of its actual primary functions is to stop espionage against our commercial interests and preserve our national security from an economic standpoint. So when we look at the intelligence these guys get, because they get briefings, as you would know, they get briefed and they get this intel. This is where the intel passes across. And that ties into what you were saying, and it becomes an enabler. They then tap in, they sit on a board, they show up, once a month, they do one keynote speech, and they're getting $1 to $2 million. They're getting that $1 to $2 million because we, the taxpayer, paid them to acquire a certain amount of knowledge that is now being pushed across to the private sector.
Bureaucrats.
As hard as it is to imagine giving Daniel Andrews more money, I would give him an extra $500,000 a year to know that he is not doing what he's currently doing with the Chinese, to go down that path of influence peddling, to have that certainty that there are laws to be certain that Daniel Andrews cannot do that.
And that's the key.
And that sounds awful to most people. Everyone in Victoria, how could you want to give Daniel Andrews more money? Well, look at the alternative we've got right now.
That's the key, laws, and we don't have them. We've got a regulation for almost anything. Here, you've got a law for a plastic straw, but we don't have laws to prevent this transfer or imparting of knowledge from one to the other, and it's being done in such a surreptitious nature that they're really digging to down to the bottom of the barrel to get this information across. Who pays at the end? Because once that private sector gets it, you're not getting this cheaper. You were getting it cheaper when the government was producing it. Privatising profits while you socialise the costs.
That's disgusting. Moving on, guys, from that, I'm open to very radical changes on that. Like, I think every time we register a debt with the budget, I think all the politicians should have a massive cut. I reckon, there's a lot of I'm crazy on like that. There's a big, I've got a very open mind to different solutions on that. But moving on, we had an interesting situation this week where Robert Irwin had basically said that he wasn't down with Pauline Hanson's cartoon of him and Mr. Bluey. And Paul wrote underneath here, under Channel 7, they said, "Mate, get over it. Fans abandon Robert Irwin as he threatens to sue over cartoon." Paul Warren wrote, "Bob needs to go to Bunnings and buy some timber and nails to build a bridge and get over it." If you guys missed this story this week, Robert Irwin threatened to sue Pauline Hanson over this cartoon, essentially depicting him in it. What's your reaction to this, guys?
There was nothing that bad that was in that cartoon. I watched it. There was nothing derogatory. She wasn't defaming him. She wasn't doing anything. And I think Steve Irwin's rolling in his grave because he was the eternal larrikin. He really was. He was a typical Australian larrikin. So what happened to his son?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he's just been too much. He's been too much sort of venerated because of his father or something.
Potentially. I think he'll look back on this and probably say, I should have just had a good laugh.
Taken it on the chin, on the chin. Yeah.
Look, the way I see it is, we've become such an overly sensitive country where one of the very principles and cornerstones of being in an open, participatory democracy is saying things that do offend people. So me liking a Commodore of a Ford, so if I like Commodore, someone who loves Ford's going to say, "Oh, you're a total loser," hey, Ford's fix or repair daily, man, or Fiat, fix it again, Tony.
Yeah.
Like really, we've become so sensitive. We should have the right to offend someone, and I say that with respect because there are certain levels of offence, but everything's offensive now, and I think we've become this society, and not just us, but we're seeing it in a lot of the West, where, that's offensive. You don't say that. Don't wear this, and the colour of a skin. Well, no, you should have a right to say something that offends someone. Otherwise, we don't progress. We don't progress as a civilization because science is a great way of looking at it. Unless you offend something, you cannot progress.
Debate. We need to be able to debate. If we cannot debate, we don't have anything evolving. You're absolutely right. We're stopped debating in science because science is Dr. Fauci, apparently. He is the science, so you can't really debate. And the same thing with politics, same things with bureaucracy. We've stopped debating.
Nuclear renewables, there's one. They're offending each other, but it's going to bring us closer to something good. Now, if we take a unilateral step on anything, and we've seen that with the rollout of the vaccines, everything was shut down, and you can't progress as a nation unless you offend something or someone. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, not at all. Look, I think my personal opinion is I think Robert Irwin needs to move on with this. He needs to sit down with Senator Hanson, have a drink, have some of her gin. This is not a paid promotion, all right? This actually, one eagle eye last week pointed out to me that they actually saw this on the shelf already. This is not a paid promotion. I got this last year. But seriously, guys, if you want to support that cartoon, I want to see them continue. Please support Senator Hanson and what she's doing.
If you drink enough, you will see cartoons.
I haven't tried, Tony. I haven't tried. But Chris, did you have any last words on this?
25 years ago, Pauline did pursue Pauline Pantsdown over this. But that was not over being featured in a piece of content. It was about how it was featured. Right. And having watched that episode of Robert Orman, I struggled to know what the complaint. It was jovial. It was not defamatory. It was not particularly. It was not awful.
He looked cute. I thought he was really cute in it. Right? I thought she depicted him in such a lovely way. He looked good. Bluey looked cute. I mean, really, I thought it was a great little cartoon.
And maybe the claim is you can't lose the Bluey Robert Irwin trademark. That's okay. How much money did Pauline really make out of that? And we're getting into this kind of commercial law, and that's where I'm like, okay, so if we're going to try on both sides of Pauline Pantsdown, yeah, that did happen, but why that happened and what Pauline Pantsdown had to say in portraying Pauline Hanson was more accurate than the content of it. And if that failed, where Pauline could not successfully pursue in court Pauline Pantsdown, this is just noise. And congrats on Pauline on leveraging the Streisand effect.
We love you, Pauline.
Yeah, God bless you, Pauline. Look, moving on. The UK has been a complete disaster the last week. I wish I was in the UK. I wish I had the opportunity to cover this topic, but the best thing I can do is cover it from here in Australia. Nigel Farage is completely destroying a party that is older than Australia, the Conservative Party. The Tories is what they call the Conservative Party, the fake Conservative Party there, the Liberal Party there. Tories' hopes go up in smoke. The Reform Party, Nigel Farage's party, has now overtaken in the last week the Tory Party, the Conservative Party. They're now the second most popular party in the UK election. They are actually looking to get more votes in total than the Tory Party. I mean, this is shocking. Imagine if I said to you, Senator Hanson is about to get more votes in the next federal election than Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
That's exactly what's going on over here. And this is the future that lays ahead for Conservative parties in the West, including Australia, if they don't actually do this. At the moment, in the seat of Clacton, which is where Nigel Farage is running, the polling is indicating that he's currently polling on 37%. This guy's going to, I said it last week, he's going to take this seat. He's going to take this seat. So in the UK, guys, they don't have preferential voting. You might look at 37% and be like, oh, you might not win. No. It's whoever gets the most votes. There's no preferential voting. Okay. So he's clear. I put money on it that he's
what
actually
a good system. When are we getting rid of preferential voting?
Look, Nigel's made the point. This they call it first past the post. Is the only other places they have first past the post is there and Belarus in Europe, I think. He said this has heavily held us back. We've only won a few seats in the past with 4 million votes. He wants to reform the system. They can't have senators there. They have this ancient system with the Lords. Their upper house is, their lower house is like ours, with like the House of Commons is our House of Representatives. But the upper house, unlike ours, doesn't allow for a Senator Hanson or a Senator Babbitt or Rennick to come up. Basically, they're appointed by the Prime Minister. It's shocking. It's completely shocking the way that they operate.
So Rishi Sunak appointed people?
Yeah, pretty much. They appoint people to the House of Lords, and usually they're like former prime ministers that get appointed, or it's like people that donated to your campaign. But going back to it, they unveiled their contract. They usually call it a manifesto. But Nigel Farage and the Reform Party have referred to it as their contract because they don't want... when you think manifesto, you think lies. That's what he says. Their contract with the UK people, this is what we're committed to. Rain, hail or shine, we are going to pursue this agenda. No compromise. What does this agenda look like? Obviously, there's the big things like immigration. They want net zero immigration, meaning they don't want to be having more people coming in than... they want more people to be going out than coming in, basically, essentially. Other key points, they're rejecting the World Economic Forum agenda, cancelling the WHO membership, rejecting the cashless agenda, laws to stop woke ideology, freedom of speech bill. They're going to stop cancel culture, scrap net zero, fast-track nuclear energy, a bit like us, support farmers, scrap bans on fossil fuel cars, tax system to support marriage, and oppose to CBDCs, which are, of course, central bank digital currencies. I've seen a ton of memes going around. This one it's a long time since we had a national hero, and it's 007 with Nigel. The guy's completely taking over. And one thing I thought you guys would find really encouraging, and Joel, why are you spending so much time talking about UK politics? The UK is 3 or 4 chapters ahead of us, and we're starting to see that take place. The UKIP party, UK Independence Party, is one party that Nigel used to be in. And when they saw Nigel announce, they said, you know what? We're going to step aside in key seats that we know Nigel and his party could win in. This is a spirit of encouragement we're not seeing in Australia yet. I'm here to help encourage it. I'm here to make sure that parties like the Libertarian Party, the One Nation and the United Australia Party work together. I'm sick of them being separate.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, and Natalie, you've run for a couple parties. So have you, Tony. When I look at this, and sorry, Chris, have you run before for the Libertarians?
Yeah, a long time ago. It was a lark. It was a laugh.
There you go. Well, looking at this, we have a ton of people. They're totally aligned on these values. Yeah. We need to get to there because they are at the point. We don't want to be where the UK is now, where they're not sure if they can even pull up the plane in time. Australia, we're a few chapters early. We got to end this division between the parties. We've got to be efficient with what we're doing. No one said, I'll get your reactions to this, guys, after this video. No one said it better than Sargon of Akkad. He's Carl Benjamin. He made the point that, yeah, we've got to work together and stop kicking each other.
Responsibility to help promote Nigel Farage's message as far and wide as we can, as far as we can get it to go. And this requires message discipline. It means we all have to be singing from the same hymn sheet. Now, I know there are people who are like, well, I'm not a fan of Nigel Farage. Hang on, hasn't he said bad things about you? Hasn't he said bad things about this? Hasn't he said bad things about this person? Maybe. Doesn't matter, because it's not about you. And if you feel like counter-signaling, you're trying to make it about you. You're trying to make it so you're the person in charge. You aren't the person in charge. Nigel Farage is the one in charge. He's the one leading the charge, taking the slings and arrows. He's got the name, he's got the brand, and he's the one getting results. So it's your job to simply promote the message, to promote him while he's in that driver's seat. Because he ain't going to be there forever, and if you think you're going to be the guy who takes over afterwards, then great. When you have the energy and the force behind you, then the same principle will apply. Message, discipline. But until that's the case, we have to support what he's doing. Because he is the only person in Britain, the only right-wing politician in Britain, capable of doing what he's doing at the moment. And he's a superb communicator. He keeps winning these debates because the answers to the questions of our time are on our side. So let's all get in line. Let's all make sure that this goes as far as it can go.
Sorry, Carl isn't no one. This is one of the first guys that got banned before Jordan Peterson, before everyone. He got banned off like Subscribestar and a bunch of other organizations, PayPal. He's one of the most banned YouTubers online, massive following, millions of followers, and based in the UK.
Didn't he run in the UK at some point in time? I thought
he did UKIP.
Yeah.
He actually ran for UKIP.
Yeah, he ran. Yeah. But what you have right there is a man speaking with no ego. And this is the problem with the leaders of minor parties in Australia predominantly, is they lead with ego. It's not about a single individual. It's about the whole cohort. It's about our country. And the second that they realise that, I think we'll have something.
Right-wingers always go on about facts over feelings, but then end up making these grand principled gestures because of the principle and put a stake in the ground and say, I'm doing it because of the principle of it. It's like, well, that's just a feeling. A principle is not an outcome. A principle is an idea. A principle is you're doing it for your principle, not for the group's principle.
Yeah, I think it was a clever move changing from the manifesto to a contract because it's a powerful term, the contract. And
binding.
Yes, because it binds you to something. It keeps you there. And if you don't, you've broken a promise and there's going to be some sort of a remedy. And I think a lot of voters can comfort from knowing that we're not in a manifesto, because a manifesto is just a floozy-woozy bunch of words, unicorn sort of stuff. It's all out there. I can do and say whatever I want, but it doesn't bind you to anything. And the term contract, I think, is a very clever perceptual move on his behalf and his party, because there's just so many positive connotations. Because what are one of the biggest criticisms of politicians? You don't keep your word, and people are pissed off, and excuse my language, but people are pissed because everything they're saying, whether it was follow the science, whether it's we're going to do this and we're actually in the process of changing the economy and we're going to be so much better off that you're going to get a $23 tax cut that's coming in the next 2 years, while I give myself a $600,000 wage. Well, no, people are pissed off. They're rightly pissed off. And until such time as they bind themselves and keep their word.
And to Chris's point earlier on with Dutton, when you said that he was looking at the people, when you watch Nigel Farage on camera, that's what he does. He looks at the people. Same thing with Trump. He looks at the camera and he's talking to the individual. It just hit me then. But thank you for pointing that out. So, because I've watched Nigel Farage and I think he's an incredible orator.
Nigel Farage has brought on board Zoomers as his media team. Almost all of them are under 30. Well, many of them are under 30, mid-30s. But he's no longer getting the Ogilvies, BBDOs, the big established communications and media firms. He has brought on people like us, people that we know, with cheap cameras, with fast editing, turning it around quickly. You've seen so much of media. It is spectacular. It is spectacular content. Fast, highly edited and polished, not yet another press conference from the Prime Minister. No. Hi, I'm Nigel. I want to talk to you. Here's where I am. Here's what's happening. And it's over in 30 seconds and it is hot and ready to share.
It's brilliant. I mean, millions of views on TikTok. I said last week I had the privilege of bringing him out in 2020 under the Turning Point Australia brand. And I spent time with his offsider under 30 and I spent time with Nigel. He's the exact same.
Yeah.
It's same with Trump. He's the exact same. And I like patterns. This is why I'm able to see what's going to go on in Australia. And when I look at Australia, a larger-than-life figure, I can't see anyone other than Pauline.
We like authenticity.
Babbitt?
Yes.
Authenticity.
That's the word. That's the word.
Rennick.
Yeah, but older. No, but hang on. Babbitt's too young.
Yeah.
Babbitt's too young. If you think Trump's going to be, 70? Very, very, he's going to be 70 very soon. Nigel's getting on. I only see Pauline. The problem is Pauline, she's older. She's obviously a woman, but I like that about her. I like that she's a tough woman because it angers the left, especially the Teals that say, "Oh, we're women." It's like Pauline's been there forever and she's been bullied, and you guys said nothing.
I beg to differ about the Teals.
The Teal?
They might claim they're women.
Yeah, not sure. Let's put a question mark. We shouldn't assume their gender.
Never assume. That could be a they, them.
That's right. Look, I'm going to keep giving you guys updates on the UK election. I feel like I'm covering it way too much, but the reason why I know what's going on here is because I learned it from Nigel. I learned it from watching Trump and the MAGA movement, Canada and New Zealand. These trends will come to Australia, and when the time comes, we're going to have to act on it, learn the lessons and look at it. But moving on, Nigel has actually insisted that Kiev will have to seek a peace deal with Russia as reform leaders say Ukraine may have to be partitioned in negotiations with the Kremlin. Nigel clearly coming from the angle of, look, we need to cut a deal. We can't keep doing this thing with the over there. I totally agree with this sentiment. Politicians should be drafted into fighting for every war that they vote for. Wouldn't that, I think, a similar thing applying to the debt where their pay gets significantly cut if we have a debt in the next budget, Anyway.
Agreed. That was actually a great comment because I think what Albanese and the Australian government seem to miss is they don't really speak to the people who have come here from Ukraine, who are refugees from Ukraine. I've spoken to quite a few of them, and yes, initially they're very patriotic. They don't want their country to be partitioned. But at the end of the day, how many people are going to die in this war? How much is the worth of land? They are now recruiting 17-year-old females into the army. I mean, come on, seriously.
It's a meat grinder.
It's a meat grinder, and it doesn't serve a purpose, and it's not going to solve anything. And you've got, I don't know, I'm from that particular area, so I know Putin's a tyrant and Zelensky's no better.
Look, there's an old saying, and it says, "War has never determined who was right, only who was left." And And that's an apt comment here because on one side we have, and I'm not going to take any sides here, but we've got the Russian side saying, look, I want a buffer zone because it's a NATO thing and they're encroaching. That's one of the arguments. The other arguments is you're on our land, the Ukrainians saying you're on our land. But then we also have ethnic enclaves, and those ethnic enclaves are Russian ethnic enclaves.
Exactly.
That they claim, hey, they're predominantly Russian speaking. Where did we see that? Well, we've seen that in many other countries around the world too. So it's not just there. It's a problem, and there's ancient enmities and affinities that occur in many countries all around the world. And when we look at that, there was a peace deal that was almost signed.
Except for Boris Johnson.
Exactly right. So where do we go? Well, we come back to that military-industrial complex saying, hey, you know what, we can tap into this. We can create our own meat grinder. And how do we create the meat grinder? Well, let's sell weapons and arms, and let's do this, and let's get people saying, I stand for Ukraine and I stand for Russia. But what's happening now?
Oh, yeah, it's disgusting.
It's sad.
It's like Nikki Haley saying, I want war with Russia. We're going to take them out. Vladimir Putin.
This is the problem. We've stopped realising the value of life.
Yes.
It's land over life. It's that industrial war complex that's making money. It's all about money. It's the same thing with the pharmaceutical industry. Everyone has to be sick for them to make money. Same thing with the war. Everyone needs to have a war so they can make money out of the arms.
Who has to serve in the military will become an issue in our next election. In the US, Sunak put forward mandatory military service.
UK.
So in the UK, in the US, you saw selective service now become essential registration. Potentially in a Senate amendment going to be for women as well. And we, NZ and a few other countries, we've now said can join our Australian military as well. That will continue forward to our election in February, whenever it will be. And I think will become a mid-range issue and it will be expanded.
Well, interestingly, Australia, I think it was February 2023, and it sort of slipped away from everyone's mindset, is they sent a company of commandos as forward, what do they call advisors. Now, we've seen this.
To Ukraine?
Yeah, in Ukraine. They've been there for some time now. Now, where did we see this? Well, they did this during the Vietnam War too, where they sent in their advisors, and America did exactly the same thing. And then we start seeing mission creep. And mission creep, we start seeing this. Then we start seeing South Korea join, and we start seeing... So we're seeing this, and Australia has its area of operations. And we're starting to see that French soldiers are reportedly being found dead on the battlefield. Whether I can't verify that, but the source is out there.
They are. There are a few Telegram channels that post this and actually show you the French soldiers and American and it's just sad. It really is. It makes me sad. I'm a female. I hate war. So
No, it's fair enough. Look, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. I haven't fully filtered. I have recently been coming to the, entertaining the thought that maybe the First and Second World War, it may not have been as good that we fought it, the way that we were actually lied into that war. It's a very controversial statement, but I've been listening, and I'm not fully sold on it either. I've been listening a lot to Peter Hitchens and a few others talk on the topic, and to an extent, America was almost lied into those wars and pressured into it, whereas the American people didn't want to do it. And I'm really worried that a lot of these European wars were things that the founding fathers of America, they didn't want to be dragged into of Europe, because Europe's always been at war, historically. And looking at it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, the world wars had incredibly traumatic responses, generational impacts. All the most competent people in the First World War, whether it was the artists or whether it was the politicians or the priests or, whoever it was, the creme de la creme of the society went to war. They were the brave ones, and a lot of them got killed. And often these widows, they didn't get to have kids, or they, fatherless homes.
It's the intelligentsia that was killed in a lot of the wars. But when you look at wars in general, wherever there's a war, America seems to be there at the moment. So, Afghanistan and Vietnam. And
particularly in the last, say 80 years.
Yeah.
And that's post-World War One, because I remember writing a thesis on ethnic violence and war back at uni. And what we ended up finding, you always walk out with more questions than answers, let's face it. But what you end up finding is wars don't start now. So if you look at World War One, you can trace it back to the Boer War, okay? And then it works its way up, and then you start seeing jostling of borders, and you said this, no, you said that, no, you said... And then other countries start pushing, and then, and that's what we're seeing here. We're starting to see, we're seeing what's happening in Europe, and we're getting, there's a lot of vitriol between these countries now. We're also starting to see out in the Pacific, what's happening in the Pacific. Well, it's almost a case of where we're seeing the Japanese and the Germans. So Germany, with its colonies and that all around the world, Japanese had the Pacific, so we had China. Okay, and so we're seeing almost this mirror image of what was occurring pre-World War II, and we're seeing elements of goading. So each country's trying to goad each other into making this one step that the other country won't tolerate, and that's where we're at now.
Yeah, wars happen when there's a miscalculation.
Yes.
Guys, we're getting on way too well, and we've got a ton of stories to get through. Just quickly, I wanted to very briefly cover this one. This is about the United Nations warning AI could spread Holocaust denial misinformation. Many Jewish groups have basically warned of the point that, they're worried that the fake fabricated images, deep fakes, could actually further misinformation on the topic. And I thought I'd bring this up because last week we were obviously talking about AI and the dangers of it. I'm really worried that they're going to go too far with censorship, and they're going to be things that are actually true and they're not fake, and they're going to say, oh, it was a deep fake. Like Joe Biden falling over. Let's say he actually fell over and he falls over. And then the left's like, oh, no, he didn't fall over.
Didn't the speaker in America say that anyway, that all this is deep fakes? And
Cheap fakes.
Well, the UN, I think, is going too far. I think this is their way of saying, we can censor people. There's too much misinformation, disinformation. Let's just censor everyone and, give Julian Grant more things to do. But, and then they bring the Holocaust into it because that's, look, I'm Jewish, so I'm the first to say I've been there. Those gates were where I was in 2019, not 2019, last year in August, because I've always wanted to go. But that's not a reason to censor. It's not a reason to censor. If anything, look at AI. Look at how that's developing, because there's been no controls over that.
Yeah. Sorry, I did want to move to the next story because I know you're all going to want to weigh into this one. Steve Bannon has predicted that Trump will be sentenced to years in prison. Former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon delivered a major speech at Turning Point this week. This is from Valuetainment, by the way, Patrick Bet-David's outlet, who does phenomenal work. They're going to sentence, he's warning they're going to sentence Donald Trump to multiple years in prison. However, he also predicted Trump will ultimately prevail and be inaugurated in January 2025. And Charlie Kirk, echoing those concerns, he said, be ready for a July surprise. Very possible they pull Biden out of the race, that is, and sentence Trump to prison on July 11th. The entire race could be just about to change. Watch closely which Democrats get the ruling class treatment in the coming weeks. If they pull Biden, is Kamala the replacement? Whitmer? Shapiro? Newsom? Be ready. Something is coming, something big. Well, I saved this for last, so we do Australian stories first, then UK, then the US, because US is just, it's nuts. It's like a movie, what's going on there. I mean...
A Disney movie? Sorry.
We're getting Disney later. This is shocking. I mean, July 11th's around the corner. We could see a situation where, he ends up getting sentenced.
Oh, totally. Look, what's happening in America is perhaps one of the biggest travesties of any liberal democracy in the world, and that is this, is that we have stood for freedom, freedom of elections all over the world. Well, that's been the image. And here we are, one of the very countries that purports to represent and prepared to fight for that is now engaging in perhaps one of the most heinous forms of it. And I think that's where the greatest pity from an external perceptual point is that when we look at it from the outside, and I lived there for a number of years, and it was never like this. It was, fair fight. Well, that's the way it was, because in America, it's all about the dollars, and maybe not so much the fair fight is perhaps the wrong term, because it's all about dollars over there.
2000 election, Roger Stone leads a group of angry Republicans to stop the vote of the hanging chads for Al Gore. We've kind of been here for 20 years. 1968 Democratic Convention, where they split into two different parties over the Southern strategy, race politics, Jim Crow, all of those kind of things. Teapot Dome scandal, 1910s. Politics is never particularly clean. We have these rosy glasses of it's like, oh, it was all much easier. We still had huge divides, but we had fewer of them. Now they seem to be on so many different fronts. And indeed, it is pretty rare that we're sentencing presidents to jail.
What we didn't do is attack political.
That's exactly right. And I actually think that Trump is probably one of the biggest threats to the deep state, and that's why it's actually happening. I mean, you've got whatever you want to call them, cabal, deep state, WEF, whoever they are.
Intelligence community.
Yeah, that too. The three-lettered agencies, yeah, all them.
Well, the reason he is who he is because he calls it the way he sees it. And that's where that authenticity comes from.
Well, which president took no money, no wage? There has never in history. I don't know of any other presidents, prime ministers who decided not to take a wage. Really, Albo? I'm challenging you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, I'm just guessing Theodore Roosevelt may not have. He certainly appealed on these kind of because that was the antitrust breakups. But let me hand that.
We'll have to look it up.
Look, I certainly hope nothing does happen to Trump. I think that what he's done, look, the way I see it, and he's being stitched up. That's just my personal opinion. But I think America will grow greatly if he comes back into the White House. And
Totally.
You'll see the world turn. You will see geopolitics turn on its head, and they don't want that.
That's right. It was interesting because I interviewed Clay Clark, who's he's mates with Trump's son, and I asked him about Biden, and I said, well, how are we going to have a debate between Trump and Biden on CNN? I mean, Biden can't string a sentence together. Don't you think that perhaps somebody will substitute him? And he was like, no, it'll never happen. But I just don't see how Biden can run.
Yeah,
he can't even walk. How is he going to run?
Yeah, I think it's going to be crazy moving forward. And we just got this news from CNN. Actually made the point that, they're going to be muting the mics for Donald Trump and Joe Biden during the debates. I'll get into the rules specifically in a sec, but I guess they're probably trying to do this to stop moments like this with Donald Trump versus Biden.
Was not a loser. He was a patriot, and the people left behind there were heroes.
Really?
And I resent.
Are you talking about Hunter? Are you talking about Hunter?
I'm talking about my son, Bo Biden. You're talking about.
I don't know Bo. I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. It wasn't dishonorably.
Cocaine use. And he didn't have a job until you became vice president. Once you became vice president, he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
that is simply
and various
not
other places.
True.
He made a fortune.
My son.
And he didn't have a job.
My son, like a lot of people we know at home, had a drug problem. He's overtaken it. He's fixed it. He's worked on it. And I'm proud of him.
Yeah, it's not shocking they're going to be doing that. Specifically, they said microphones will be muted throughout the debate except for the candidate designated to speak, which will be controlled by CNN. The venue will not grant time for the candidates to have opening statements, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer a question with 1 minute rebuttals and then 1 minute responses in the rebuttals. One of the reasons why Nigel Farage is doing so well in these debates in the UK is because there's actually a lot of their mics don't get muted. And to see that, I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to completely stack this thing. If they keep that up,
but he's got no teleprompters. Yeah. I don't think Biden's going to have a teleprompter, which is right. I don't know how he's going to debate. I'm actually sorry. I'm really perplexed how this man is going to string several sentences together.
I don't know how he's going to rebut when he mostly.
Sorry, I just he's just not going.
Yes, no, I don't know how he's going to rebut if he can't string that sentence together. And look, I'm really concerned. Look, you see a lot of stuff on social media and things like that, whether it's AI or not. But when he's reading from a teleprompter and he's reading out pause.
Twice.
Yes, and he's forgetting things, and I actually think it's sad because
it is sad.
We're seeing someone who's perhaps really, and I say it with the greatest respect, at the end of his time, and he's been at the end of his time. Perhaps he shouldn't have been there, but to get him into these debates, I think it's terribly sad. You know, the other day we had Barack Obama grabbing him by the hand and saying, you know, come this way. And sometimes you see him walking off into another direction.
Georgia Malone was trying to tell him where to go because he got completely lost.
That's
within a few metres.
Bear in mind, this is a guy who's carrying purportedly this briefcase with codes. And if it does come to a launch, I've always worried that we're going to lose because he's going to forget the PIN number.
Yeah, we've all been there, haven't we, Tony? even I've been there, and I'm 27.
I thought you were being sympathetic or empathetic, and all of a sudden you come out with that.
No, it's a good point. It is older abuse. I think a lot of people said that.
Yes.
I think it was Obama. He said back in like 2019, 2020. He said, "Joe, you don't have to do this." He also said, to someone close to him, he said, never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F things up. And I think we're seeing that. And, there is a weird dynamic there, isn't there, between Biden and Obama, yeah.
If the Republicans are able to get a wireless mic on Trump and they do their own separate stream, you are going to see wall-to-wall clips of everything that CNN didn't want you to hear from Trump. That would be wall-to-wall coverage.
Why can't you tell him, Chris? Come on, you need an in.
Chris, you got to get it done.
Just imagine that you've got the CNN stream, which is they decide what you can hear, and you've got the truth stream.
Didn't someone do that on either 60 Minutes or A Current Affair, and they had a completely different interview?
Harvey Yemeni and...
somebody did it.
Bill
60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Was it? I can't remember if it was 60 Minutes or A Current Affair, but somebody...
Trump. They cut up Trump.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was it Trump or
Yeah, it was a completely different, just totally different interview.
Carrie Lake as well,
Yeah.
She had a debate.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if they stitched her up. But yeah, we see this all the time. Actually, it was Avi, and it was that comedian, the Aussie comedian. I forgot his name, but anyway, he toured America. Shocking stuff. Moving along, the next topic we've got just a warning. Going into the US election, there are a lot of people that are very worried about ballots and what's going on with the voting machines. In Puerto Rico's primary elections, they just experienced hundreds of voting irregularities related to electronic voting machines, according to the Associated Press. Luckily, there was a paper trail. The problem was identified and vote tallies were amended. Elon Musk mentioning there we should eliminate electronic voting machines, the risk of being hacked by humans or AI, while small is too high. This is why I like Elon. I mean, he just makes sense. The guy's South African, and anyone that knows anything about South Africa or Zimbabwe understands this guy. There's a libertarian streak in him, and I really like that about him. Obviously, all the other things aside, I think this guy is actively trying to work to preserve democracy, and he's talking about not a population reduction in the world. He's talking about we need more babies. The biggest problem we have is population collapse. I think they've misjudged him because he happens to be associated with the green energy industry and obviously subsidies and all that crap associated with it in China. But I actually have a really open mind to what he's saying on this.
He cops a lot of crap for an African American.
That's a great point.
That's a really good point.
That's a really good point. Another similar topic: non-citizens pouring into America. They're being handed voter registration forms throughout the USA. This is also from Valuetainment, Patrick Bet-David's outfit. He said a new report from the New York Post claims that non-citizens are receiving voter registration forms when they fill out their government paperwork in every single state in the US, besides Arizona, which passed a law to ban this practice. This is what I'm worried about, and this is the exact stuff I was banned on talking about back in 2020. They're clearly skewing this. They're clearly skewing this in a way to go against Trump, so that a lot of these immigrants, they're grateful to the Democrats for opening the gates, but they also know to actually vote Trump out and vote the election out. But what do you guys think about all
this? This is where Elon, I think, is getting at too, because this is where a lot of countries out there, you've got to put a thumbprint or a fingerprint, and you need to verify who your ID. Well, we do it here too. You show your ID, and they mark you off the roll, and this and that. It's a little bit harder. Look, nothing is foolproof, but with the development of AI and hacking, we see non-state and state actors able to get into these systems, and that is what Elon's talking about. And you're right, he he's a patriot of sorts. He's a patriot for democracy, freedom, and all that sort of stuff. But I think when you look at it, we are at a perilous intersection here, and that perilous intersection is technology. AI needs to be controlled, but to what extent? Because it can actually be used and abused for different purposes. And who is controlling that AI? That is the scary part here.
No, absolutely.
That is true. I think it's interesting to note that they've got the Dominion machines in the States, right? Something we don't have. And yet, when it came to something like the vaccine passport, it was all paper-driven. There was no digital anything. So if they didn't have a system for that, why do we need the Dominion machines?
Yeah.
When they can be hacked, they can be changed. I mean, we saw that in 2020.
It's an interesting point. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm eager to see what they've done. A lot of these Republican states, I'm eager to see what they're going to do moving forward. But I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump's set to be sentenced on the 11th. We don't know what's going to happen with his court case yet. But the Secret Service are laying down plans to actually prepare in the event he is put in jail. I didn't know this, but from listening to Tim Poole, Secret Service have the power to basically take over any building in protection of the president or the presidential candidates. They could totally clear out the entire prison if they wanted, and take over that entire prison while Trump's serving his term in there. So they've been making plans, the Chief of Secret Service, to actually prepare in the event of that happening. This is in relation to the case involving him and the falsification of business records. The judge has not been very warm to Trump at all, and whilst normally this wouldn't carry a prison sentence, we could see a situation where it's been adjusted slightly so that this Judge Juan Merkin can actually, I think he's the one that was smiling in court, could actually sentence him on July 11th. And I think that's going back to what Charlie said. Crap's about to go down. I mean, it was only about 2 weeks ago, 4 years ago, that we saw a situation where the whole George Floyd riot started and America burnt and billions of dollars of damage took place. We could see a situation very soon where we are in an election year, guys. This is why we got banned last week on YouTube and a few bans on TikTok. It seems that every time America has an election, the world has to suffer as a result, and we're seeing a situation where America is actually going to the elite. They're worried Trump's going to win. It's seriously bad.
I've got an idea.
Yeah,
and that idea is this: put some bars on some windows around Mar-a-Lago. He'll be sweet, because at the end of the day, he's got everything he wants there. It's a resort.
Yeah,
because if they take over that building, it's just going to be. Exactly what you said. It's just going to
you're right. Normally, with this particular law that was broken, it would be at home,
at worst, home detention.
Home detention. But because of the criminality of the way they've adjusted to approach, this is not a typical trial, guys. And if you're not paying attention, you've definitely got to watch this interview between Donald Trump and Dr. Phil. They've bastardized this case. They've bastardized the law. The judge is clearly against him. This area where the jury is from, they vote 90% Democrat, 10% Republican. That's the pool of people.
And he lost his appeal. He lost his appeal because he appealed to be able to speak, because they're silencing a former president of the United States of America. I mean, that is unheard of. I don't know if that's ever happened before. Chris might be able to tell us. Well, I've just thrown you under the bus.
To a degree, Richard Nixon's probably the best example, which I can get in terms of limiting his access to it. But even Nixon was immediately pardoned by some of his own party, I might highlight. But I also think that if LBJ was in a position, would have also pardoned him. I don't think we're at that now. A lot's made of partisan issues such as tax policy and what have you. Taxes you can move around, you can move up and down, you can change. These are kind of the issues that are very hard to move on and heal. If wholesale sales tax, remember how big a deal that was at the 2000 election? Howard's going to bring in the never GST, this, that, or whatever. Even the carbon tax, a big deal. These are issues that you can put in a carbon tax, you can roll back a carbon tax, you can move these things around. These are wounds that last generations.
I don't know how that works when we had Joe Biden, I think, was it in Ukraine, where he said, he's talking, well, hell, if you don't do this, you're not getting your $1 billion, or, you're not getting your aid. So How is that in this?
Not corrupt. Yeah. So what he did was he used his position as vice president. He said, if you don't fire this corrupt prosecutor, this Ukrainian prosecutor that's investigating Burisma, which my son is on the board of, and was giving money on the side to Joe Biden, the big guy, and everyone else, 10% for the big guy. If you don't fire him, you're not getting the $1 billion. You're not allowed to use taxpayer money. You're not allowed to use your position to leverage and threaten other people so you can financially benefit yourself. But he did that. It was caught on camera and nothing's happened.
Just like nothing happened from Hunter Biden's laptop. Absolutely nothing.
Interestingly, on that point, the US has a law, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You influence another public official, which he's done it openly in the media. He's actually bragging about the way he does it, and he's done it. Why is that not a breach of the Foreign Corrupt Practices and the extent to which we're talking taxpayer dollars here? Okay, remember the government doesn't own any money; it's taxpayer money, and the government holds those funds on trust for the taxpayer, saying, "Okay, we're looking at investing in X. We use taxpayer money to do this." He's using taxpayer money to influence another public official, a direct violation.
Don't let a good law get in the way of a corrupt politician, right?
It's only a reward if you're not involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, it's selective enforcement. It makes me sick, honestly. It makes me sick. That's right.
Dear, oh dear.
Oh dear. Look, I have to tell you guys we're changing the way the show works because we copped, if you didn't hear, we copped 3 bans on TikTok due to LGBT and other topics regarding the jab. I'm going to be doing a first show with regards to being on here on YouTube and on the safe, the not safe platforms, the platforms where they censor, and then the remaining 30 minutes or so will be on my Rumble, where it'll be in its entirety. It'll be on Rumble, it'll be on X, it'll be on Telegram. But I wanted to bring this up just so you guys understand. Not only do we get those strikes, but on YouTube, what this looks like is when you search the Ark with Joel Jammal, it should come up. It should come up, and it's not coming up. The other channels are coming up. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about, which is why I need you all to get over to X. Elon's doing a phenomenal job on this. You can also follow the other speakers that are here on this platform as well, Tony, Natalie, and Chris. This is what we're up against, and this is why we've got to get you guys off these platforms and over there. I've in the last few weeks, I've gotten thousands of people across onto there. I need you to do the same for these lovely people and obviously get across there. Very soon we are going to switch over to the full show, which is going to be on Rumble called The Ark, X, Joel Jammal, and Telegram. You'll see Real Joel Jammal there. Sorry, there's only one page for that. But this is the thing with social media. This is the thing with censorship. We're in an election year. We have to adapt in order to move forward. It's what makes us strong, and that's okay. And again, if you guys please remember from the start of the show, before I bid you farewell on YouTube, please go and support this gold company. If you're looking to get your money out of the currency right now, if you're sick of inflation and you want to put your money in a way where it's not getting devolved, gold and silver is doing very well. Daryl and the team over at As Good As Gold, let them know that we've sent you when in the referral section. And I will see you guys later. Please give these lovely people a share. Give this podcast a share. And for those of you switching over to Rumble now, we'll keep recording.
You know, it's funny with censorship. You always read about it online, but then actually seeing it on your device in front of you, trying to bring up the Ark podcast, it just sends that chill down your spine. Like, oh, but why can't I see that? Who's decided this? Why do I have to specifically put in this keyword and put it's so frustrating. Look, moving to the next part of the show.